Let's talk about some of the most dramatic, maybe even scariest prophecies in the entire Bible. You know the ones. They fuel all kinds of predictions about the end of the world. But what if we've been reading them slightly wrong? What if the historical context changes everything? Well, we're about to dive in and find out. So here's the big question we're tackling today. When Jesus was talking about all these cosmic signs and this great tribulation, was he actually describing the end of all human history? Or was he talking about the end of a very specific era, the destruction of Jerusalem back in the 1st century? Think of it like a mystery. We're going to follow the clues right there in the text to see if we can crack it. I mean, you can see why this stuff gets people thinking about a global apocalypse, right? When you read language like this from Luke 21, it just sounds final. The sun going dark, stars falling from the sky, the whole world in total chaos. It's an absolutely vivid picture. But this is right where our investigation begins, because some clues suggest this language might not be as literal as it sounds. Our first clue is tiny, but it is incredibly powerful. It all comes down to a single pronoun in the book of Luke, just one little word, they. Let's see how this one word has the potential to reframe this entire epic prophecy in Luke chapter 21. So in this verse, Jesus is giving his disciples a super practical warning. He's telling them, look, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out of there. Run for the hills. Why? Because the city is about to be completely destroyed. So when he says they will fall by the edge of the sword, who is the they? Well, the context couldn't be clearer. It's the people living in Jerusalem at that exact time, and this is where it gets really interesting, because verse 27 mentions the Son of Man coming on a cloud. So who is the they that's going to see this happen? Has the subject just suddenly switched from the people of Jerusalem to every single person on the planet, or does it mean something else? You know, when you put these verses side by side like this, it just clicks. The most natural, straightforward way to read this is that the they who fall by the sword are the exact same they who will see the Son of Man coming. It's talking about the inhabitants of Jerusalem. The same generation that rejected him would be the ones to see his vindication. So here's the argument. Seeing the Son of Man wasn't a prophecy about a physical return to earth. Instead, it's a direct callback to the prophecy in the book of Daniel, where the Son of Man receives authority and glory from God the Father. In this view, the destruction of Jerusalem would be the ultimate proof, the ultimate vindication of Jesus' authority, right in front of the very nation that had rejected him. Jesus also told the high priest that he would see the Son of Man coming in Matthew chapter 26, and the high priest clearly understood that Jesus was claiming to be the one that Daniel saw in his vision. That's why he said that Jesus uttered blasphemy. Notice how he was not thinking about the second coming when he heard Jesus saying that. Okay, let's move on to our second clue. This one helps us make sense of all that dramatic imagery, the falling stars and the darkened sun. To really get this, we have to understand the specific kind of language that Jesus and the Old Testament prophets were using. It was a language all its own. This is such a key concept. All through the Old Testament, you see prophets using this judgment language, but they weren't predicting asteroid strikes or supernovas. They were using it as a powerful metaphor. When a great kingdom fell or a powerful king was overthrown, it was such a world-shattering event that they described it as if the heavens themselves were being shaken. It was their way of saying this isn't just politics. This is an act of God. Jesus was followed that same prophetic tradition. Now for our third clue, and this one's a bit of a logical puzzle. See, if these prophecies are all about a final global judgment day, then another part of Jesus' instructions just doesn't add up at all. Right here in Luke, Jesus tells his followers to pray for the strength to escape. He wants them to be able to get away from what's coming. Now just stop and think about that for a second. How exactly do you escape the end of the world? If it's a global event, where do you go? Let's just walk through the logic. 1. Jesus tells his followers to pray to escape. 2. A final global judgment day is, by its very definition, inescapable. There's nowhere to run. And 3. Believers aren't supposed to escape that day anyway. They're supposed to be vindicated by it. So the only conclusion that really fits is that this escape was a physical flight from a local event, which is exactly what Jesus warned them to do when they saw those armies surrounding Jerusalem. Okay, so now let's switch gears and look at the other famous account of this speech over in Matthew, chapter 24. What we're going to find is that the same clues, the same patterns, and the same logic show up here too. It's like finding a second witness that confirms the story. This is another one of those fascinating little details that can change everything. The Greek word here is gay. Now this word can mean the whole earth, or it can mean a specific region, a land. So how do you know which one it is? Well, context is king, and when Jesus is talking about who will be mourning, the choice of translation makes a huge difference. Just look at the difference here. All the tribes of the earth sounds completely global, right? But all the tribes of the land, especially in the middle of a discussion about Jerusalem, pretty clearly points to the 12 tribes of Israel. This wording connects directly to an Old Testament prophecy in Zechariah chapter 12, where the tribes of Israel mourn over the one they pierced. It fits perfectly. So what about the angels who were sent to gather God's chosen people? Well, the Greek word here, angelos, literally just means messenger. Sure, sometimes it means heavenly beings, but plenty of times in the Bible it just means human messengers, like John the Baptist. The argument here is that these weren't celestial beings, but human evangelists, the apostles and their followers, sent out after Jerusalem fell to gather God's people from all over, a mission that was now exploding to include non-Jews. You can compare this to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 22 verses 7 to 10. So we've seen how the pronouns, the prophetic language, and the command to escape all seem to point toward a first-century event. Now we come to the final clue, and it's hidden in the very structure of Matthew 24. This is the key that honestly unlocks the entire chapter. Believe it or not, the entire flow of this famous, complex chapter shifts completely on one of the smallest, most common words in the entire language. And once you see it, you really can't unsee it. That's it. The word is but. In Matthew 24, verse 36, Jesus finishes talking about the destruction of the temple, an event he gave specific signs for, and even a time frame. And then he says, but concerning that day and hour, no one knows. He pivots. He completely changes the subject. This chart really lays it out. You've got two totally distinct sections. In the first part, Jesus is answering their question about Jerusalem's fall. He gives them a time frame, this generation, and he gives them specific signs to watch for. Then, starting without one word but, he switches to answering their second question about his final return, the second coming. And for that event, the timing is a complete mystery, and there are no signs given. He was answering two different questions, and he deliberately separated the two answers. So let's put all the pieces of our investigation together. The pronoun they consistently points to the people of first-century Jerusalem. The earth that mourns makes more sense as the land of Israel. The command to escape is logical for a local historical event, but not a global one. And finally, the whole structure of the chapter is unlocked by that one little word but, which neatly separates the prophecy about Jerusalem from the teaching about the final second coming. And that really leaves us with a final massive question to think about. If this interpretation is right, if many of these famous end-times prophecies were actually fulfilled in the first century, how does that change the way we see Jesus? Does it make him a less cosmic figure? Or does it actually ground him more deeply, showing him as a prophet speaking with incredible accuracy and urgency to the people living in his specific time and place? It's a fascinating thought to chew on.